The first federal opioid trial begins today in Ohio. Two counties are taking on 6 powerful drug companies in their fight against the opioid crisis that killed more than 400,000 people. Aisha Hasni joins us live with more. Good morning, Aisha.
Good morning, Tracy. Yeah, so this first trial is happening in Cleveland, and it's sort of a bellwether trial for all the others to follow. Now, these 2 Ohio counties are suing multiple drug makers, including the country's big 3 drug distributors. Now, this trial particularly will focus on distribution. Were the companies obligated to halt shipment of suspicious orders? And if so, did they comply? Now, this is just a small piece of a massive trial involving 2,600 lawsuits, cities and counties basically across the U.S. suing doctors, pharmacies, and, of course, big pharma, blaming them for the opioid epidemic that's killed as many as 400,000 Americans. Now, families and communities want these companies to pay up for what they've had to spend so far on drug treatment and fighting drug-related crime. One mom who lost her son to an opioid overdose describes how she felt when Johnson & Johnson was ordered to pay $572 million back in August.
Nothing's going to bring my son back, but this victory allows his death to stand for something, and I know he's cheering right now.
Yes, so many families still looking for justice. Now, there was a last-minute $48 billion offer to settle this over the weekend, but the cities and counties that are suing, they refuse that. And the reason isn't the amount of money. It's that they want control of how the cash will be distributed.
Yeah, and I know the defense had an issue with that as well. Aisha, thank you very much for that live report. For more on this landmark trial, let's bring in attorney David Bruno. And to be clear, again, as she just mentioned, it's the distributors that they're going after. What are they going to try and prove in court here against these companies?
Yeah, as far as the distributors, there's a federal law and regulation required the distributors to come up with a process to identify misuse. And
bulk orders, for example.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they should have had a process in place to identify that there were too much drugs coming into these 2 specific counties. I mean, that's important, too. This is only 2 counties.
It's tough to prove, but I'm not the attorney.
It's sheer volume.
Okay.
It's the sheer volume of it. Yeah, and the distributors, they're going to say, we're the middleman. We didn't manufacture this. We didn't prescribe it. And the DEA was involved as well. In fact, DOJ, our DOJ Horowitz Inspector General, right, he recently came out and pointed fingers at the DEA to say that they didn't do enough, that they had quotas that actually
you know what, though, is it the government's responsibility, though, to police? You know, I mean, a doctor writes a patient a prescription, whether they think they need it or not. I mean, I'm assuming that they would, right? Right. Personal choice, personal responsibility.
Sure.
I mean, I'm thinking as the company's defense.
That is another layer. That's another layer, personal choice. You have doctors involved. You have the government involved. You have personal choices of the people that actually use the drugs and parents, like we saw here.
Yeah. Well, and it's horrible. I don't want to sound insensitive, but it's horrible what's happened with these opioid deaths. But at the same time, can you really fault the companies and I mean, maybe the doctors?
Well, we're going to find out in this trial. If this goes and it doesn't settle, it still could settle.
Yeah,
but that is the issue with the distributors. Did they do what they needed to do as far as the federal law to create the process?
Okay, I want to ask you about the impeachment inquiry and the latest. I want you to listen to what Mick Mulvaney and Chris Wallace discussed on Fox News Sunday. Sure. Get your reaction.
Aid to Ukraine depended on investigating the Democrats. Why'd you say that?
Again, that's not what I said. That's what people said that I said. Here's what I said. There were 2 reasons that we held up the aid. The first one was the rampant corruption in Ukraine. The president was also concerned about whether or not other nations, specifically European nations, were helping with foreign aid to the Ukraine as well.
Mulvaney was pushing back again. Well, he was basically defending himself, some comments he made last week. Do you think that Mulvaney put the president in more legal jeopardy with the impeachment inquiry?
Anytime he opens his mouth right now is putting the president in more legal jeopardy. They need to button up here. They need to be quiet. Hey, criminal defense rule number 1, be quiet. It must also apply to impeachment here as well, because they cannot get out of their own way on this issue. Button it up.
So the more they say, the worse it could be for the impeachment proceedings. That's interesting, David.
It continues on. It's Giuliani back with Stormy Daniels, and now this. It just does not stop. Be quiet.
Okay. Well, David Bruno, thank you for that perspective. Glad we got that in.
You got it.
All right, Trace, over to you.